Teachers, what's the worst thing a kid brought for show and tell? I don't quite get why something like that isn't allowed. I get that it's associated with firearms, but on its own it's inert and harmless. Most bullets aren't even sharp. It's more dangerous for a kid to have a rock. Brought a snake in from recess and it wasn't even S&T. I was banned from recess for a week and not allowed to bring anything living inside the school. It was 4th grade and I had just moved to a new town. Farm boy trying to fit in. It was just a small garter snake but freaked the class out when it hit the floor. Splinter Cell. The monkey's paw sits ready on that one. Any new Splinter Cell game is going to be a modded Ubisoft game, which means an open-world game designed to extract maximum profit from the player by forcing them to choose between an extended grind and microtransactions. I would love for another Chaos Theory, but I feel like it can never happen again. The Jedi Knight series I feel like doesn't get enough credit for the platform gameplay, especially Academy. I would love to see more. Ed, thank you so much for the awards. Glad to know there's plenty more of people like me out there who miss and replay old JK games. Academy had the most options for lightsabers, guns, and force powers, also had a huge variety of moves, total freedom of motion, and a pretty damn good story too. It even had an amazing vehicle level. It's very sad to see that in the past decade very few games have attempted that level of variety. Academy was fucking amazing. I replayed it 4 or 5 years ago and yay, the graphics were hurting, but it's still the only Star Wars game, until Fallen Order, that I actually felt like I was fighting with a lightsaber. Did entire run-throughs using nothing but force powers and saber. What I loved about SSX3 was the sheer absurdity Uber system and points that you would accumulate. It was addicting trying to fit in the most spins, rotations or tricks to get super Uber, like that feeling of just pure momentum and power from getting all your tricks lined up one after the other was chef's kiss. Aside from that, it had a super deep customization system for a game like this with stats and cosmetics and various playable characters. Really great to be able to unlock mountains but then upgrade your character to take it on, whether you spin fast or handle better. My only fear is that, being an EA title, there is no doubt in my mind it would never come back the way we'd imagine. You're going to get microtransactions out the ass for things like cosmetics or even stats. God forbid you introduce loot boxes into the franchise. I loved 3 so much. First time I played it coming off of THPS, I hated the control scheme, but very quickly realized how much more superior the number buttons are over the face buttons for tricks. The most amazing thing of SSX3 was how once you unlocked the whole mountain you could go from top of the peak to the base of the mountain without a single loading screen. Absolutely amazing. Oh yay, and let's not forget DJ Atomica. Discovering Dark Cloud 2 completely blew my mind with how much content it had. It's insane that nobody has tried to copy the formula with modern technology. Lots of modern crafting, dungeon diving games are similar, but it's like ... DC2 is still the better game even after all these years. Challenging dungeons, crafting, photography, fishing, golf, a full-fledged city builder with customization, fun storyline and cutscenes, time travel, good graphics for the time, plus other things that I'm sure I forgot. Just listing them out loud I'm like holy crap, that game was amazing. I swear there is always 2 crowds in the C&C community, being those that basically only play generals and don't play the rest, and those that play the rest but don't really care about generals. Personally love me some generals and try to dabble in the other games, but they play so differently I just can't. Oh god, the moment I saw this thread I thought of C&C. If it's any consolation, There's official mod support coming for Open Raw on CNC Remastered. It's currently in alpha for Tib Dawn and I cannot wait. Every single CNC up to Kane's Wrath has just been wonderful in my eyes. Truly amazing games. If this doesn't happen in the next few years, then Konami is just leaving money on the table. The last few Resident Evil games, of which 7 and 8 bear some definite PT inspiration, prove that AAA horror games can be successful and massively lauded. And considering the fact that SH and RE are basically the two Titan AUG horror franchises, I'd think developers would want to pick up the gauntlet that Capcom has essentially thrown down. The game world was fucking massive as well. The city in Jak 2 was already gigantic, and then Jak 3 added various areas of the wastelands which were an order of magnitude bigger than that on top of it. The first game was pretty damn sizable too. They kind of hit a high note for 3D platformers, collect-a-thon style games. Honestly, that whole genre needs to make a comeback. There was something so satisfyingly simple about wandering around huge areas trying to hunt down all the various tokens and achieve certain goals to unlock the mega tokens that let you progress further in the game. Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie/Banjo-Tooie kicked off the genre and it only got better from there, with series like Jak, Ratchet and Clank and Sly Cooper just perfecting it with deep stories tied to all of the exploring, collecting. I really want to see a revival of AAA titles from major studios that follow the same pattern and don't lean on ridiculous difficulty, Souls-like combat to push more sales. Just deliver us a huge world that's unique and fun to explore, lots of fun ways to explore it, a cast of lovable characters and a good story to motivate us to go exploring for those various MacGuffins. Gaming need not be something massively complicated, just fun. Dude, nice work. Junior high school me put a lot of hours in on those games. I recall the combat being ahead of its time. Sorry to hear that about P2, but likely explains why it felt a tad underwhelming story-wise. Though with upgraded graphics, mutations, and combat, was it due to a timing constraint? Seems to always be the case. Number, something about legal issues in other countries, couldn't show X, Y, Z in Germany, couldn't show A, B, C in New Zealand. There were a couple different legal things so it was just cut, can't remember specifics. All I know is we had about 15ish versions of the game all in test at once and it was a complete nightmare. Infamous is such a console seller for me. I'd like to have a PS5, but I haven't been too broken up about it yet because there aren't many PS5 exclusives that I feel like I'm missing out on. But if a new Infamous game comes, I'll be watching those PS5 drops like a hawk. But also, I really just want an Infamous collection release on Steam. Would love to play through 1 and 2 again, but I sold my PS3 years ago assuming they would eventually be ported over, and then it never happened. I need another Infamous game. I'm happy for Sucker Punch and their creation of God, but I'm begging for their next focus to be on Infamous. I go back and play the first 2 all the time. Even second such brings a weird nostalgia to me. First Light is so incredible on its own. Dude, I was so heartbroken to see them not have a new game ready for the PS5. I knew they still were probably focused on GOT, but I thought maybe they would at least show they had a plan for a new installment. But nothing. I'm not saying they won't in the future, but I'm saying it's been so long that I've been deprived. I think it's my favorite video game series in my favorite fictional world. I did. It was fun, and it has more voice acting / story. I think the puzzles were more difficult in Portal Reloaded though. Portal stories, Mel made you think outside the box and do some tricks you don't find in the other Portal games. So there's definitely some real aha type moments where you figure out the trick to a puzzle. PR though, you kind of end up with 5 portals in each puzzle. You have your regular orange, blue, but then the time portal, and then another orange, blue in the other timeline. In addition, the fact that changing something in the past makes a change in the future, but not the other way around, meant that every puzzle had a lot going on for it. I've been saying this for years: change the setting from a small private school to a big public school in the suburbs. Expand the social cliques feature beyond just preps, nerds, and jocks. Bring in the punks, goths, rednecks, skaters, stoners, rich kids, etc. One of the coolest features of the original game was how literally every student had a personality and unique features and an in-game opinion on you which you could influence. Keep that, multiply it by 100. Your player character is a new kid, a troubled orphan living in a group home. You get to keep the strict curfew game mechanic, and the walled garden safe house structure. The map is a busy suburban corridor surrounded by seemingly endless cul-de-sac neighborhoods in various states of decay. There's weird Easter eggs in the surrounding woods. The player tries to get through their classes and navigate the complicated social strata, ultimately falling in with the wrong crowd. Burnout was a racing series, but the significant part of gameplay was causing other racers to crash fully destructible cars and environments. There was even a play mode where you got to launch your car down some sort of ramp, varies a bit by map, and into traffic, and you get points by causing the greatest amount of damage. Very fun. Edit. Geez guys, I'm glad so many other folks enjoyed this. I am humbled by the awards. Kind strangers. I would love another proper Burnout. Burnout 3 was, without question, the best racing game on the PS2, and 4, Dominator and Paradise were also all very solid titles, but EA just decided to move the Burnout developers onto the Need for Speed series. After all, why have two different arcade street racers, right? And sure, some of the titles Criterion made for the series, such as Hot Pursuit, were well received. It's just not the same. Need for Speed is what happens when a game publisher watches a bunch of car modders doing donuts in a Tesco car park, after watching a Fast and Furious movie, and tries to replicate it in video game form. Yes, mechanically it's similar to Burnout, but all of the aesthetics are different. Need for Speed was baked into real-world cars and modding, along with some R&B/hip-hop/grime/dubstep, and a bunch of dodgy 20-somethings evading the cops because family or whatever. Burnout was not that. Burnout was pure arcade fun. There was no story. There was no effort to capture an aesthetic or pander to a subculture like Need for Speed. Burnout just had a rock soundtrack and wanted you to have fun. There were no characters, no story, no real-world cars or worrying about car specs or customization. It was just purely, here's the car, head for the road, here's your opponents, turn the radio up and enjoy. It's that aesthetic difference that matters. I never cared for Need for Speed because I was never into the whole car modding, illegal street racing scene, but Burnout was just arcade fun with the soundtrack I could rock out to, and I wish it had got a true sequel after Paradise. Literally my first thought when I read the question. I still have the first 3 games, but Twisted Metal 2 will always be my favorite. It was the first game where the story actually got to me, namely with Grasshopper's victory ending. Fuck, it still depresses me. Missed only having one controller growing up. This felt like a video game that the whole family was really playing. Whoever was at the keyboard was just controlling, but I felt just as involved in the game when I wasn't the person at the keyboard. I should break out Riven again. Never was able to figure out that whole game. In case you don't know, there is a bunch of great spiritual successors to the Must series, such as basically every Must sequel, and there is spin-off Abduction by the same creators, and the upcoming Firmament, Quern, Undying Thoughts. Probably the most Must-like game not made by Cyan Worlds, The Witness. This is what I came here for. SACOM and SACOM 2 were just epic games. The single and multiplayer were just so good. Edit. for remembering my buddy and I set up on crossroads, with RPGs, each watching down a road. That day, we learned what backblast was. It was the funniest experience I've ever had on an online shooter. La. If you know, you know. Yep, Tomato and that group did a fan translation and put it online. They offered it to Nintendo for free. They also said that if Nintendo hinted at doing an official localization they would take down their own translation. I don't know if it's still being up makes me happy or sad. Chromounts. It was an awesome Xbox 360-era mech game where you would custom build your mech and then have team battles. You could play anything from quick scout meshes, super heavy gun platforms, or a commander mech with a radar dish that let your team talk with each other without having to capture a communication tower, and each had their role in team fights. There were 3 factions, each with their own style of mesh and new equipment being researched every so often, and their borders changed daily depending on which faction was winning more battles. There were a lot of neat concepts and the gameplay was solid, and I'd love to see a sequel. Mainly because Konami went insane, and just about every one of their experienced developers has quit and moved to a new company by now. Even if there were to be a new Castlevania, you wouldn't want to play it if Konami made it, and no one else is going to make it because Konami would probably put prohibitive time and budget restraints on it. Bloodstained is good, though. It's Castlevania in all but name. This game is hands down the reason I love old school hip-hop. Volume 2 they reminisce over you. Every time I hear that song I'm transported back to my old tube TV with the GameCube plugged in the VCR, sitting on the floor, about 8 p.m. on a summer night just vibing to the all-time greats, basketball and hip-hop. What a weightless feeling, pure time. I will never forget it. Soul Food Memories X 10,000. Not a teacher and not in a school but the clinic I'm at had a sort of show and tell with the kiddos that come in, and someone brought some very inappropriate anime magazine that bordered on hentai. He wanted to show everyone his favorite scenes and even brought a notebook full of his own drawings featuring characters that had the likeness of a lot of people on his life. Not a teacher, but I remember a kid bringing in his hamsters. They were in a cage with tubes. I think there was like 4 in there. He got up and talked about how he liked hamsters and that he's had a bunch of them. He then proceeded to take one out, tell us its name, and out of nowhere he says, "Oh, and check this out." Then he held the hamster above his head for all to see and squished him. My dad had a great show and tell story. He caught a big gardener snake. It was about 3 feet long from his telling, and was telling all his friends at school about it. The teacher told him to stop lying and he told her he wasn't lying. She then said fine, bring it in. My dad packed up this gardener snake in a big old jar but broke it on the way to school. He walks into class with this big snake in his hands. The teacher freaks out, jumps on her desk and is terrified of it. She sends him to the principal's office. The principal was also a woman, who wouldn't let him in cause he was holding a big gardener snake. The principal called his mother, who simply responded with, "Why did the teacher want him to bring it?" And then, he ended up getting the day off school and didn't get in any other trouble from it. Wasn't show and tell, but once during morning break while I was a student teacher, 2 6-year-olds came to find the class teacher in the staff room. They had something to show her. She came back with pictures. These boys had found half a dead and decomposed hedgehog and decided to pick it up and put it on her desk. Needless to say, hands were thoroughly washed and drenched in sanitizer. Not worst, but coolest, a student of mine brought in a taxidermed, stuffed bear from the shoulders up that his dad had killed with a bow. Best part was that his parents didn't know he brought it. He snuck it to school in a huge black garbage bag. A couple of years later he brought homing pigeons that he and his dad are raising and training, and did a whole presentation with the headset mic and everything for the school. The whole family is full of the nicest and coolest people I've ever met. Easily one of my top 3 favorite families of all time. Not a teacher, but there was a girl in my brother's year whose dad owned a junk salvage place. Girl brings in an old thermometer. Okay, cool, whatever. She then goes, and then this is the most fun part, and proceeds to smash the thermometer on the desk and play with the mercury. How that got resolved, but I do know that by the time I got to 1st grade, we no longer had show and tell.